Great. So my name is Jessica Allison, and I'm so excited to welcome you to ProductTank RVA. We have a super exciting, a great lineup of ProductTank talks brought to you by our local product community here in Richmond. So this may be my favorite event of the year, where we get to showcase a lot of our own talent, which we try and do, but never this much variety, this much quantity in 1 hour. As we get started, just a quick reminder that by staying here, you are consenting to being recorded, and we do share these with our members after the presentation. We'll send out a link to a recording on our YouTube channel. So what is Mind the Product and what is ProductTank RVA? We do like to share these at the start of each event because we're part of a larger global community, which is really awesome to represent both our hometown as well as bring all of the great resources of Mind the Product to Richmond. So Mind the Product is the world's largest community of product people that's united by a mission to push the craft of product management, product design, product development forward. And then within each community, we have product tanks, and there's over 100 of them around the world that bring the local product communities together to share their experiences and learn from each other. Here is the wonderful organizers crew. I can't say enough wonderful, great things about them. So we've got Travis, Austin, Isaiah, Sarah, myself. We get together and mostly just have fun, but we also bring these events to you. If you're interested in joining us, please reach out, or you've got an idea to share. We'd love to hear from you. We do send out emails after each event and ahead of new events, so keep an eye out for those. If you're not currently getting them, put your email address into the chat box or send it over to Austin or myself individually. We'll make sure you get added to those communications. Lots of great resources in there. If you're looking for a career in product, we want to help you with that too. A lot of local employers are hiring, and we've actually seen a lot of uptick in the product management community here in Richmond. So here's a few to start your journey. Book club, we'll send out this list, thinking about ideas for next year. This is a big one. So the Mind the Product community is running a digital conference next week on the 18th and 19th. So if you visit the Mind the Product website or search for hashtag NTPConDigital, you should be able to find the materials. It'll be a jam-packed 2 days full of talks by product leaders and thought leaders in our craft, as well as get-togethers and ways for the community to share ideas. All right, and without further ado, I'm going to bring us into our lightning talks. We've got an awesome order, and we're going to keep these speakers to 5 to 7 minutes. I made them promise, and we're going to get through a lot of variety in an hour. Please be active in the chat, add your feedbacks and questions to our speakers, make connections. That's what we're here for. And at the end of it, please, please, please give us feedback. We're going to put a feedback survey into the chat. We'd love to know what you think, what you'd like to see more of, and we'll continue to grow our community. So that being said, I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Luke. Get to start here and take it away. We'd love that.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Great. I had some slides, but I'm having technical difficulties, so I'll just go off of no slides. So my name is Luke Rabin. I'm the head of product, co-founder of Builder. We are a digital product agency, and I'm going to tell you real quick about how we had to validate 10 business ideas in 5 weeks through our new program called the Idea Factory. So just a quick overview of what Builder is. We do two things. We co-found tech startups. We've done it 11 times and are doing more. And so that's called a startup studio. Our other side is our product architecture practice, where we design and document new high-end tech products for scale. So the Idea Factory was something that came out of our startup studio, where we have had to come up with a process for how do you go from an idea all the way through an MVP, fundraising, building a big product. So it's really hard. It's really exhausting to do that, even one company at a time. But we had come up with this process that we thought we could help more companies with, because in startup ecosystems, there's a lot for companies that have MVPs, and there's almost nothing for people that just have ideas. So we wanted to help people that don't even have companies. They just have ideas. Maybe they have a team. I don't know. But we partnered with Startup Virginia thanks to COVID. I guess the one good thing is we got a grant to do this. And so we have 3 of these cohorts scheduled. And so we got about 70 applications. We accepted 10. And over 5 weeks, we had 3 hours a night with these 10 companies and our product coaches. And I had a great slide to feature all of our awesome product people that helped. And I wish I could feature them, but they were incredibly helpful. So that was great. And that's the only way that we could have gotten through it. So the goal was to turn an idea into what we've called an opportunity statement. It's just combining target market, job to be done, and kind of problem type. And there are lots of different things. And sorry, I wish I had the slides for this to make it a lot more sensible. But to take that, use interviews to identify more of those, and then use surveys to quantify and sort those. So we would start with one opportunity statement, like for people in physical therapy, or people in physical therapy need to track all their exercises at home because they need to heal, but it takes too much energy, or it's too difficult because all the exercises are on paper. That's kind of like an opportunity statement. And so we'd identify lots of those, do interviews to identify those, send out surveys to sort them. And in the slides, there was all these numbers on there, which if anybody has seen Moneyball, the whole idea of that is how do you have one number to which you can make decisions off of. And so that one number in Moneyball, it's called OPS. It's on-base percentage plus slugging percentage. For us, we came up with a metric that we called market magnitude. And this is a talk in and of itself, so I can't go too deep into it, but it has 3 factors. So one is the opportunity magnitude, which we kind of use as a way to quantify potential energy in the market. So the difference between somebody's motivation to do a job and their struggle to actually get it done. So we kind of came up with this rubber band analogy where you could stretch the rubber band, where one side is the desire, the other side of the struggle. So the further apart, the more potential energy there is. The second factor is frequency of doing the job in a year. So maybe it's once a year, maybe it's 5 times a week. That's a factor. The other one is an adjusted market size, which not everybody in a demographic is actually in a market to do a job because they may just not care enough. So those are the three factors that we could come up with one number to say, what's a more viable market opportunity? Helping people write grants for nonprofits, or helping families with multiple kids get their kids to an activity. Let's see, I'll hit the questions in a second because I'm on my phone and I can't read anything. So that was this kind of aha moment where we could find these numbers and actually sort across industry, all that kind of stuff. We could find this number to actually quantify these things. So we learned a lot. And the biggest learning is we're going to do it a whole lot better next time. So that was our biggest learning. So the first one is anytime you productize something, if you jump off the rails and don't get it perfectly in the first few steps, it makes the steps that follow a lot harder. So next time we're going to get that right. The second thing is that people who don't know how to do something need to be told exactly what to do, not particularly how to do it, because it's so new that they can't really wrap their heads around how, like the theory. So we need to be very tactical about telling people exactly how to do an interview, and the questions they should ask, rather than here are the best kind of best techniques or things like that. The third thing was that we used Airtable, and people hate Airtable. I love it. But so we'll need to build our own platform for this, which is fun, but is going to be a challenge. And the last thing is that there is a huge need for this, which is surprising, because after we did this, we've had lots of inquiries from other cities, other organizations that want to be able to do this, just because, as we thought, that there's nothing really out there for people who have ideas. So that is about as fast as I can talk about that, and I'm done.
Well, you did one, awesome on time. You set the bar high for all of our other speakers. Two, brand your slides however you like. If you feel comfortable sharing any of them or a subset of them, we can get them out in our email. And
Awesome.
Thank you for your flexibility not to fight with the technology.
Oh, for sure. And now I got to go pick up my daughter from school.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. If there are any specific questions, and we've got a few folks that say they want to know more, we'll think about what the right channels for that are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Steve. And make sure you can get off mute.
All right, and let's see if I can share my screen. Looks like I can.
We can see.
All right. I am Steve Van Dam. I am the CEO and founder of Light the Music, and it's great to see some friendly faces up in the mix here. I'm also joined by Tom Ilmensee, is in the chat, and he's been working with me since the right at 9 months ago, at the juncture here that we're going to talk about today. So what I want to talk about is how we went from a thriving model to another model, and from before COVID to after COVID. And so let's talk about where we were before. We had found a really fantastic product market fit with special ed programs, private schools, also public education programs that needed music education that was accessible to kids. Kids with special needs can't play instruments necessarily. They may not be able to be in a traditional music program, but music is really beneficial to them. And that's where we found this really awesome fit with our iPad-based programs and curriculum. And we developed it in a way that non-music teachers could teach it. So we gave basically this turnkey program, and we were seeing 400% growth. We had come through Lighthouse Labs and got some funding, and everything was just all green lights. And then COVID hit. And what happened immediately was kids were out of school. They didn't have necessarily iOS devices at home. And you can't really do what we were doing outside of a classroom. Not to mention that our customers had about 20 bigger priorities, including the health and safety of their teachers and students. So we looked at that model. We did some testing on ways that we could solve that, and then we also started looking at what other problems were out there, and we found a really big one. Traditional music educators, especially from about 4th grade and on up, teach music by, it's called the BOC Industrial Complex, band, orchestra, chorus. And kids pick an instrument, they practice, they show up, they play music. That's how they're taught music. And those traditional music educators weren't really interested in our program before COVID. But after COVID, without instruments, without live music, without the ability to put kids into ensembles and that payoff of playing music together, teachers at the end of last school year were already seeing participation rates just drop through the floor. And they were they were desperate. We talked with a lot of these teachers and they said, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. Please help. So in the after COVID world, we got out of the building via Zoom, and we did tons and tons of interviews, a very rigorous process that Tom set up of asking admins, teachers, even parents and students, a list of very specific questions, talking about experience, user experience, and then we started prototyping some different ways that kids could make music and some different technologies for that. And as we were talking to teachers, we learned about the magic of the band room. And that is this wonderful place where any kid is included. It's social, it's collaborative, there's teamwork, it's inclusive, it's a safe space. And teachers almost got tearful sometimes when they talked about this. How are we going to have this? And we realized that that was the thing that we really need to kind of focus in on, that and engagement. How are we going to get kids to engage in music? Now, my background is I was a pop musician. I played in a band. And I think the most engaging thing in the world is playing music with people, creating music together with a band. And so what we landed on was for these teachers to put their classes into small groups and to create music with a digital audio workstation technology called Soundtrap. And these kids pick their own band, their band name, their style. They get to choose their avatar name, their stage name. They get to style that. And then they go through these series of creative processes as they make music together. And so where we're at is we launched that this year, year one AC, and we are in about 15 teachers' hands right now. About 1,000 kids are using this program. And we just in the first quarter kind of rounded the first corner with one of our teachers. And we're seeing what these bands are doing. These kids are super creative. They're making music that you've never heard before. They've just opened up this toolkit of music creativity and putting that to video. And it's pretty wild, the stuff they're doing. So we're testing. We are continuing to improve the product. We're also supporting the teachers very hand in hand so that we can hear immediately any problems that they have or ideas that they have. They're supporting each other as well, which is really important because virtual teaching is hard. And that's this is just a little example of one of our part of our game board, which is these series of activities that kids go through. And there's a quote by a music educator named Von Fleischfresser. I'm not sure if that's how he pronounces his last name. And he says, if you want to improve the well-being of a child, you let them sing in a choir, you let them learn an instrument, and you let them get lost in all of the beauty, support, and connections that come from such things. That's what you do. You immerse them in music and music making. And we think that now more than ever, this is a beacon for kids who are trying to figure out virtual learning. And it's something that's super engaging, it's fun, it's connective. And so we're really stoked that this pivot has landed us here at this place. And we have an ask. We are looking for more teachers to join us and try out this program. So if you know of any teachers, or if you just want to spread the good word, please point them towards lightthemusic.com. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. We'll stop your screen share. There's some chats. Tom has also been responding, so a little bit of engagement there. Let's keep it up. In the meantime, Adarsh, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're going to make sure you can unmute.
Cool. Thank you. So just to clarify, my name is pronounced Adarsh. It's like telling the animal an otter to be quiet. So otter, shh, Adarsh. it's a slightly difficult name, so I always like to kind of give people some context on how to say it. And yeah, thank you, Jessica and Travis, for having me here today. It's great to see some familiar faces and talk about something that's really a thought in progress for me. This is a concept that I've started ruminating on with my recent work with tailored industry. And what I want to do is I want to kind of talk a little bit about what I've been doing with tailored industry, and then give you some takeaways that I've learned so far, and also maybe leave some open-ended questions that I'd love to hear your thoughts, you as the audience's thoughts on. So a little bit of background about myself. I've kind of formed a career around this concept of product, right, as of many of us here. So product has taken a lot of different forms throughout the different engagements that I've been through. I started in client consulting. So their product was very much a deliverable. Product was something that I helped someone else achieve. I facilitated product. Then I started a couple of companies of my own. So I had Insight, which was a visual project management tool. So there, not only was I facilitating other product creators, but I was building my own product at the same time. So that was a really interesting parallel experience. And I saw a lot of growth there. I made a lot of mistakes, but I also grew a lot. And then I had Startship, which was a product, once again, that I had designed that was in the ed tech space. Completely different set of challenges, right? Completely different set of paradigms and practices that I had to learn and adapt. But once again, a very, very fulfilling challenge and a very fulfilling time in my life, because I walked away from there with a lot of experience that really applied to a lot of other industries as well. So that brings us to now, right? What am I working on? I'm working with a company called Tailored Industry. Tailored Industry is a manufacturer. They make knitwear, and they're based in Brooklyn, New York. Now, the unique thing that Tailored Industry is doing is we have an on-demand model, right? So traditionally, the way that clothing is procured by, a department store or boutique or any sort of a brick and mortar store is they project out how much they're going to need. So let's say 10,000 pieces, 10,000 sweaters. They go to a manufacturer, they submit an order, they get the order, they hold that inventory, and then they hope it sells. What this does is it leads to a lot of garment waste, it leads to a lot of inefficient practices, and it really hurts their bottom line and the environment and the entire supply chain as a whole. And we've seen this in the last couple of months when there's massive macroeconomic disruptions. These supply chains are not very robust. These supply chains start to fall, right? So what we're building at Tailored is a completely different take on that manufacturing paradigm. So now, instead of project out orders and hold inventory, you design the product, your customer comes and pays for that product, and then the product gets made. And that's where we come in. We facilitate making the product on demand, right? So we have a really cool factory. We've got these 3D whole garment knitting machines, and I'll drop the link in right after I'm done talking so you guys can go check out the site. But there's software powering all of that, and that's where I came in. So I came in and I architected a solution that our factory staff and the organization at large can use to actually perform on-demand manufacturing. Now, this is where I had kind of a humbling experience, and that's really what I wanted to share with the rest of you. And it's seemingly simple, but it's taken me a while to fully reconcile. So bear with me if it comes off as a little bit kind of simplistic at first, but I promise that there is something under the surface here, which is sometimes inefficiencies matter. So sometimes you have to program a system that breaks what we would consider in the product world best practices. So finding the most efficient pattern or finding the most efficient flow, you have to intentionally break that in order to support the manual process that your digital solution is facilitating. So I'm building something that our factory staff is using, right? Those are human beings doing things. They're building something with their hands. It's not controlling a computer. So there has to be a little bit of play in the system. It can't be as rigid as, something like Uber, for example, which is very, very, very rigid and very structured around machine management and fleet management. But at the same time, there are certain processes that I know I could improve from a technical perspective. And, my engineering team will always tell me, hey, we could do this better, or we need to constrain this further so that we don't have these errors. And I have to come back with, well, if we do that, there's an entire cost associated with retraining the entire factory staff. And our solution starts to become an antagonist on the factory floor. We want the solution we're building to be their best friend, to be their coworker that they really trust and that they know they can count on to get something done. So in order to build that, we need that coworker to work alongside them. And what that means sometimes is adding an extra step in so that there's that verification that mimics the manual process that's happening on the floor, or making the algorithm just a little less automated in one place so that there can be a little bit of trial and error. There can be something that moves multi-directionally. These are the kind of product decisions that I've never had to make in the past because I've never had to build a product that was so closely coupled to a manual process. Most of the products that I've designed have been very, very digitally native, right? So it's been a really, really unique experience. I'm really, really enjoying this. And kind of the three biggest takeaways that I have so far, all of this is a work in progress, but the three biggest takeaways that I have so far is you need to clearly understand and thoroughly understand the manual steps in the process that you're automating so that you can identify those inefficiencies that are necessary and support them, right? And of course, the second big takeaway is identify these inefficiencies and say that they matter. Come to terms with the fact that they matter and make that conscious priority. In my mind, and what I kind of tell the engineering team is yarn over pixels. What we can do with pixels doesn't matter nearly as much as what we are doing with yarn. Yarn gets us revenue, yarn makes our customers happy, pixels facilitate that. So being intentional about that and kind of perpetuating that ethos in every part of the product team has been important. And finally, framing the product, framing the digital product as a coworker, so that instead of people getting frustrated with it, they're willing to help coach it. They're willing to give us feedback as into how to improve it to make their lives better. And there really is a little bit more of a us with them mentality as opposed to the factory staff versus the tech team, which we see all the time. I mean, anyone that's used an SAP solution or a large ERP solution can attest to this. So I hope I've left you guys with some new thoughts. And once again, all of this is evolving. I'm just starting to sink my teeth in this, and it's been a great ride. And yeah, I'll be sure to post the link in the chat box right after. We actually just launched our first internal direct-to-customer line, so there's some really cool products on there. So definitely take a look. And if you have any questions, I'll also post my email address. Feel free to reach out to me. Okay.
Thank you so much. That was a great talk. Lots of engagement and some great ideas and reframing. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly. And Kelly, I want to make sure that you can come off mute next and screen share if that's something you'd like to take advantage of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. It is not sharing my screen. Here we go. Okay. Is it sharing my Google Slide screen? Oh, there it goes. It's a little delayed here. Perfect. All right. So my name is Kelly Huang. I am a former Richmonder and used to work at Capital One. Also worked at Activision Blizzard as a global accounts and e-commerce game manager for all of the Activision Blizzard portfolio. I actually came to becoming very involved and very passionate about privacy and privacy as it pertains to the product management discipline when this little law you guys may have heard about called the GDPR came about in between 2015 to 2017. Since then, actually, global privacy laws have changed and evolved in many, many different ways. And these things are actually becoming more and more relevant here in the United States. So I wanted to bring it home with something that hopefully you guys may or may not have heard of from our girl, Cardi B. We want to build a digital experience without the WAP, which is weak ass privacy. So to that end, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. 7 minutes on the clock. Let's go. All right. So by show of emoji reaction, so y'all got to work fast because I only got 7 minutes here. Have you ever searched or shopped for something online and it started to follow you around the internet. I'm talking Instagram, I'm talking TikTok, I'm talking Snapchat, I'm talking just reading the Financial Times, as dry of the saltine cracker as it is, the Reddit, wherever. You're starting to see ads everywhere. As you can see, just searching for how big of a ping pong, and I see lots of fingers out there, and fingers, the thumb finger, not any other finger out there. So I see that we do have the ping pong table following us everywhere, online, on our phones, all day. So you know you're not alone. If you guys also saw those emoji reactions, you know you're not alone. It's annoying, it's weird, it's kind of creepy in a way, but some of you may work at my alma mater, Capital One, or at VCU, so you know that these are things that are just typical of marketing practices. So how did we get here? This is something that, you know, some folks, especially you guys that are all working in digital product management, or maybe not in product management, product marketing, CEOs, whomever, you know how we got here, right? This isn't a mystery. But bringing it back to fundamentals, we got product management 101s, AARRR. This is basics, right? How do we bring customers through the door? Acquisition, you got to go and get them. You find them, you fish for them. However you get them, you got to bring them through the door, because that's what a funnel means. You start with the most people up at the top, you funnel them down to the bottom. Next, you got to activate them. You got to make sure they have a great user experience. Next, you got to keep them, because what good is a user if they never come back, right? You just got inflated numbers for first-time users that never come back to your platform. And what good is that? Next, we got revenue, because I mean, you got all these users, what are you going to do with it? You got to make a little bit of money, right? Because how are you going to stay in business? Lastly, we also want happy users. We want to make money off those users. And then we want them to refer your product, your platform, your software to other users, so that you are able to make more of that money, because that's what it's about. The funnel game is just about making the machine work, because you need to bring more people to the top of the funnel, finding out how users find us, make sure we get visibility, because the referral at the bottom of that funnel is going to fuel the people at the top of that funnel. So how do we do that? We're using user data. You create an account, you come back. We know how many times you come back. We know how many times you've clicked into your profile settings. You guys know there's no mystery behind this. And I'm not even playing games here. I just got to bring it to the top, because the fact is that if you create an account on any platform, software platform, and you are not capturing that data, you are already behind. So you got to win the rat race. So you take that user data and you go fish for more users. Because now I know exactly the type of people that like those ping pong tables, that, you know, search for the white ping pong tables with the, you know, with the crisp wheels that fold up, that go into a closet. I know who's searching for those ping pong tables, and I'm going to go find more buyers like them, because I know we got a great product and I want to find more people that are going to go buy those ping pong tables. So I use that user data of all the people that have joined my platform, that come back to my platform, that refer people to my platform. I'm going to fill that funnel at the top with more people that look just like them. So I got to talk to you guys about something very important today, which is called data sales. This is the circle of life. I actually typically don't like to put words on my decks, but this is actually, I'm testing it out here in the lightning talk, because I'm normally a picture person. Data sales. Here's how the circle of life works here, guys. People browse websites, just like we showed, right? Businesses own those websites that people visit. Those businesses, they collect data. We all know it. No magic here. Data is then sold to those third parties, and those third parties can be anyone. Google, data brokers, Facebook, Snapchat, Pinterest, whomever, you name it, you sell something, you can sell data. If you guys have ever heard the phrase, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, it's true. It's real. All right. So the next part of this, people buy things online. This is the other half of this life cycle. People buy things online. Businesses sell those things to those people. And those businesses, they want more people to sell things to. So they are going to go and buy more of that data from third parties. So they can do things like, if you guys have already heard this, retargeting, lookalike audiences, lookalike models. This is how these businesses stay afloat, right? Fill the top of that funnel. And that, you have it here, guys. You have the supply and demand cycle, the circle of life. And that's how you end up with this, my friends. Searching for how big is a ping pong table, to freaking ping pong tables following you around the internet, following you on your phone, following you around search engines. So what I'm trying to say is that internet users are finding out. We all work in software, presumably. I heard a really great talk about the online music, and I think that is super, super awesome. Online music education, really awesome. Big shout out there. The thing is that internet users are finding out, because you want to be able to have, you know, we as internet citizens, people that use the internet, we want to know what data is being tracked on us, because it's ours. We generated it. You generated it. It's yours. Oh man, Adarsh, you got that beer and I'm very jealous. Very, very jealous, my friend. All right, so look, I just got to level with everyone. People are getting woke, all right? This is what the kids are saying. They're getting woke. So roughly 6 in 10 Americans, this is from Pew Research Center. I did not conduct the study. Pew, a very reputable research and survey source. Roughly 6 in 10 Americans believe it's not possible to go through daily life without having their data collected. All right, that's pretty scary. People know because they're seeing things like the pattern, the kind of dark pattern of this ad of a ping pong table following them around all their apps, the internet, everywhere. So the reason why that's scary is because people are realizing that they have less and less control over how that data is getting collected and what data is getting collected. Where is this data getting collected and where is it being stored? People don't think they are in control, but people decide that, hey, maybe just clicking this ad here, maybe searching for how big a ping pong table in Google is just going to outweigh the benefits. The risk maybe outweighs the benefits because I'm going to be able to find my answer really quickly. And, you know, most people don't really understand how businesses are using that data. You think that circle of life thing, most just not woke internet users are familiar with? Doubtful, very doubtful that those folks know how data sales and ad sales happen, the bidding process, the RFP process for ads. Doubtful the normal internet user knows how that works. But luckily and fortunately for internet citizens of the world, education is everywhere. You guys may have heard of this little platform they call Netflix. There are shows, there are docu-series, there are movies, there are documentaries. There's Mark Zuckerberg trying water out for the first time. I mean, we know that internet consumers are becoming very educated about the problem here, which is that it can be used to manipulate, at the darkest point, politics. It can be used to incite riots, and it can be used for social bad, but we also know it can be used for social good. I actually I used to work at MCV, guys, and Memorial Regional Medical Center in Mechanicsville, Virginia. Shout out to NRMC. I used to work in the hospital systems down in Richmond. I have seen Facebook find people organ donors. If you guys don't know, UNOS, the National Organ Donor Network, is actually headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. I have heard stories from patients where organ donation, just by like putting out an ad on Google, that they can find organ donors through these ads. They can be used for real good, really real good, saving people's lives, but it can also be used for some dark shit too. Excuse me, I didn't mean to say that. So global federal agencies, though, are demanding accountability. So, you know, as I said, the people are becoming woke. So government agencies, for once, are actually trying to do something to demand accountability from tech companies. You guys might know this already if you're working at one of these larger companies based out of Richmond. Snag a Job, I know, and BCBS and Capital One for sure. They're all definitely having to react to these. And the fact is that you don't necessarily want to be in a reactive state if you're a company as large as, say, Capital One or BCBS, because then you're going to be doing a whole bunch of cleanup. So how do we fix this? If you're in product management, which I suspect a lot of you guys are, think of AARRR. This is going to be controversial. Think of AARRR for trust as the measurement rather than pure user quantification, okay? Let's acquire trust of our users, right? We want them to know that we as a business, as an online company, are looking out for you as the user. We want to activate that trust. We want them to know and show through the things that we offer in our product, in our software, whatever it is, we want to show that we want them to trust us. We need to retain that trust so that over the long term, in the email marketing we send and in continued logins over and over again throughout the year, that we're going to keep having that trust by those users. Lastly, we want to monetize, but we want to monetize in a safe way, in a way that builds brand trust and brand fidelity, and also referring because your brand is trusted, right? All right, so this is what the not fun part is, working with your legal team to make sure that your privacy policy is up to date and easily understandable. These are things that every product manager should be doing if you have not had the honor of working with your legal team before. All right, sometimes they're a little bit stuffy, you know, but you work with them, you get on their good side, talk a little nerd legal speak with them, they're gonna be right in. They're gonna be right in there with you. Secondly, if you're in product marketing, I don't know if anyone here is in product marketing, but if you're in product marketing, do a sweep of your brand or marketing sites. Anywhere that you collect emails for mailing lists, know where that data is going. Or you can also, if you have confirmed that the data is not going anywhere, this is a really great example from a company called Dashlane. They're a password manager, will never sell your email address. And they state it up front, so that you as a user know, anyone that lands on that marketing site that wants to sign up for your newsletters, they know that you're never going to sell that email address. Confirming what use cases you're selling your data for, whether you have to, and let your visitors know. This is what the whole point of the GDPR was, in allowing for users to have their cookie consent banner, so that they could actually say right up front, hey, we do collect information about you. If you accept these cookies, you guys probably have all seen these cookie consent banners that pop up on these websites. If you do want to use our site, just know we're going to collect some information about you because we got to make some money, right? That's what they're saying. But you know, they're letting you know. In America, that hasn't caught on yet. So I'm saying, be at the forefront, be a pioneer for this, and be a real advocate for consumer transparency. Let them know what you're using their data for. Take a read of your privacy policy and work with legal to make it more consumable to visitors. If you're in design and UX, or you work closely with design and UX, you can help. We can all help. Work through some clear to user. I hate using the word transparent, but sometimes you just got to use it, right? It's clear to user to design systems and copy that put the facts in your user's hands without cognitive burden, because no one wants to read a privacy policy because it reads like a contract. It reads like legal speak, right? You don't want to be throwing too much of that stuff in users' face, because the average internet citizen does not know how to read those. Focus on user trust-centered design. You know, you guys have all heard of human-centered design, but what I'm advocating for here today is user trust-centered design, because if users don't trust your product, they're not going to use your product. Except for Facebook. They've got that like very, very clingy thing on you, like the hooks into the serotonin centers in your brain, and they got you. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for anyone that's hooked on Facebook. Okay, lastly, but not leastly, if you are an engineer, you work very closely with engineering, you're a technical product manager, you do data engineering, ML, anything, please do frequent zero trust exercise for penetration defense. This means you cannot trust any API, you cannot trust any webhook, you cannot trust any server. Make sure you are doing these exercises on the regular. Do spontaneous, I'm trying to coin these phrases, so I'm just trying it out, guys. Let me know if these resonate. Radar, that begins with a W, which means we got a data access request test. Known under the GDPR as subject access requests, and under the CCPA as right to knows. And SATR test. And I realize this shares a holiday with one of my favorite religions, celebratory feasts, but it's basically shit. We got a data erasure request. If you've ever been a part of a data erasure request from any digital organization, you know it's cumbersome, because if someone's going to try to find Kelly Huang in their database that has 15 data lakes and 36 databases across 5 lines of business, it's an impossible task. You got to engage well over 100 people to be able to get one of these things done. But you can run these as tests, just as example tests. Just try it out at your organizations if they're small enough. Also, consider a segregated data architecture that is not dependent on PII data. I cannot emphasize this enough. I have now worked with and consulted with so many large companies and small companies that use something like email address as a primary key. I'm an engineer, guys, so like, I'm sorry, I can throw some of this stuff out, but primary keys on databases need to be unique. Email addresses are not unique. So would highly recommend considering a segregated data architecture that does not rely on those types of PII information being the indicator. And lastly, if you're anyone working at an online business, don't hide from your responsibility to internet citizens. Embrace it, be transparent, let the internet citizens know that you care about them as a business and as a software company, because you want them to trust your company. And lastly, from our girl, the queen, Cardi B, I got to leave you with some words. IAPP, that's the International Data Privacy Organization. You guys can look them up later. 7 days a week, weak ass privacy, make that compliance game weak. All right. So there we are. I actually call it whack ass privacy, but you know, you got to change it for the thing. All right, cool. So there we are. Thank you very much. I'm VP of product at Ethica, which is a data privacy company. I'm not trying to show my product. I actually want to give these talks so you will never have to buy my product. In fact, don't buy my product. Do those exercises I said so you don't have to buy my product. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. I'm going to keep us moving here and turn it over to you, Rob.
All right, it looks like that's fixed. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Next step, share slides. And can everyone see presented slides?
Not presented yet. There they go. You're good.
Awesome. All right, so shift here from what Kelly just shared into a more tactical hands-on products realm. A lot of us here interacting with product teams just like this remotely over the internet for what, 8, 9, 10 months now, using the little emojis in Zoom. How many of you feel it is harder to connect with customers and get usability data or do empathy interviews this way? How many of you feel like your stakeholders internally, when you talk about prioritization and try and build support for new ideas, aren't as engaged and aren't as talkative as they used to be? How many folks honestly think it was just as hard as it is today before COVID? All right, so good spread of responses there. Today, we're going to dig into a tool that can help us all get better user data and better manage our stakeholder relationships. We'll look at powerful questions as a paradigm, jump into how we can benefit from using them and how we can ask them. And from there, we'll start a use case and walk through exactly where they can help us in a more targeted way. What better time than now near the end of the year to reassess some of these skills and try some new things out to reinvigorate relationships going into the end of the year and next year when we're already going to be paying less attention to each other anyway, let's be honest. So just by way of background, I'm Rob. I'm a consultant and product coach here in Richmond. I work with startups, established companies, and individual product managers to help us do our product work better. And that always starts with Dilbert in a lot of our world, at least at the corporate level. And that's where we'll start today. What are powerful questions? They're a way to start insightful conversations that promote innovation and inspire people to really act. They prompt buy-in through engagement and dialogue. And we're looking for a way here so that basically everything that's in this comic isn't happening in real life. You want to get to a point where people are engaged across the digital divide and when you're with them in person. We can't be together, so powerful questions help you get people engaged in the first place right now. And to do this, they're really open-ended. The rule of thumb here is to actually ask a question. You don't use the question to tell someone something. You ask and you listen to the response and you be open to where the conversation goes. So what questions are powerful? Why questions are the most powerful ones you can ask to get a conversation going, build trust, build empathy. Then you look at how, what, who, when and where, and which. And when it comes to product thinking, these are really important questions because product thinking is how we get from a user or a business problem to an implemented solution. Asking questions like this along the way and along that journey, that's a major function of success. Using powerful questions at key moments is a way to really supercharge this journey and make it more of a virtuous cycle. And powerful product questions, they range from questions meant to gather insights all the way through questions meant to build support internally for your decisions. So let's walk through this in a little more depth. There's a definite hierarchy here when it comes to uncovering purpose and building support. And that's that questions that start with why are really the most impactful. They unearth the best insights. They get people the most engaged when you ask them. And then questions that start with the word can or can be answered with yes and no, those are the least engaging, least impactful. Everything else falls on this spread in between that we'll revisit in a moment. So how do we put this in action, right? This is a really steep slope from value to just way too broad and generic. Well, we start our engagements with stakeholders or customers, like anyone who's done yard work on a hill knows, by not trying to mow directly uphill. And what do we mean there? We mean if you start with yes, people aren't going to engage. You're going to flip and land back at yes or no in the ditch. If you start asking a customer yes or no questions to get insights, they're going to say yes or no and move on. It's really hard to get all the way to unearthing the why if you start at yes or no. When you're trying to influence a stakeholder and you ask a question about whether they have bandwidth to work with you on a project, they're going to say yes or no. And that means you've got a 50-50 chance of getting their support or their buy-in. Once they say no, they're going to be harder to work with going forward, because the act of cognitively thinking and saying no to a request hardens your resolve to not engage. So you can't start with yes or no. There's no real payoff here. You flip and you end up in the ditch. But if you start with why and you mow your way down the hill with some targeted questions, that's going to increase your likelihood of success. Asking why questions to just start the dialogue, that's a pretty simple paradigm. It's not good enough. You need to ask why in an engaging, non-confrontational way. For us here over the digital divide, that means setting aside the time to actually have a dialogue and not pulling up on a 3-minute Zoom call when you have a difficult question to ask somebody. It means focusing your why question on their point of view and not guiding the response. There's a huge difference between starting a conversation by looking at someone and saying, why did you do that? And why is this decision important to you? So let's break this strategy down a little more tactically for customer interactions and stakeholder interactions. And when we think of customers and users, empathy interviews is obviously fodder here for powerful questions. Make the time to do a good interview, write your scripts beforehand, and start your questions with why to get your customers in an open-minded mood. For many of us, we usually start with a question like, tell me about a time when. Maybe it's tell me about the last time you opened the app. And that's okay to warm folks up in conversation, but the next question needs to be more powerful. That's where why comes in. A why question is going to crack that customer open and start to get them sharing the perceived value of the app in the first place. Maybe your next question is, why did you open the app? From there, you can ask, how was that experience typical for you? What prompts you to keep using the app in those situations? Who do you know that does the same thing? And when do they decide not to use the app in that situation? Can you remember any time when you decided not to use the app? That line of questioning, less than 50 words that we said, gets us a whole bunch of engagement and information from customers. Usability studies are another space here. When you're interacting with customers in an A/B test or a usability study, and you have a tendency to focus on how, what, maybe when and where, which, or even can they access this or not? Do they access this or not? Yes or no? Elevate your studies, especially now, by including a why question, either as a survey response or asking directly. That's going to help you make powerful emotional connections to real customers that explains why they're making the decisions to interact with your product the way they do. And then when you share your study results, you can start by framing that emotional reason they're interacting with your product to help your audience connect with the customer and follow your data with empathy and better understand your prioritization. And when it comes to interacting with stakeholders, getting them on your side, You know, the people you work with, those interactions are a lot more nuanced than customer interactions. Often we're trying to get information from them the same way we do customers. Other times we're trying to influence their decisions and get them to work with us on something. So when using powerful questions to get information, you're in a trust building exercise. This isn't about information flow in one way. You're in a trust building exercise because this is someone who's going to need to come to you, or you're going to need to come to them to do work in the future. So create more dialogue to create more trust. And when the questions here, obviously they can help you do that. When you're using questions to influence a stakeholder or generate buy-in for your work, this is where you need to be tactful. You need to be approachable and precise when asking why, so you don't come off as accusatory. If this is done well, you're going to signal an intent to cooperate. And the big difference here is, instead of why don't you have the bandwidth, you're going to ask, why is your bandwidth so taxed? After that, maybe, how would you like your bandwidth to really operate for your team? Why is it the way it is today? And who gave you guidance on prioritizing your bandwidth and your tasks? When did they share that guidance? Okay, can we pull up with them to discuss how the company's priorities may have changed since that last conversation and get a chance to recalibrate your bandwidth so we can work together? That conversation has a higher likelihood of succeeding for you than just starting with, why can't you do this project for me? Or, can you do this project for me in the first place? Start with their reality, explore it a little bit, go deeper, build empathy, and go from there and build in the relationship. So what we did today, we improved our product thinking tools a little bit by thinking about how we ask questions and how we engage people, explored ways we can do that to get better insights from customers and increase our success working with stakeholders. If you like this stuff, if you need help with it, if your team needs help with it right now, reach out. Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, Rob. And if you'd like to share any of these materials, and certainly your contact information, we'll get that out.
Thanks, yeah.
Awesome. So we've got a second, Kelly. Kelly, I'm going to take you off mute and feel free to take over.
Awesome. Thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
All good.
Sweet. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hold on, I have to allow. 1 second. Okay, so we're going with no slides, but that's okay. My name is Kelly Smartschan. I'm a manager at PwC, and I act as the product owner on our research credit solution. So today I wanted to talk about how I came to accepting the idea of minimal viable product. And my team's goal is to deliver a technology-enabled experience for our practitioners and our clients as they focus on value and finding more areas that qualify for the credit. So anyone who doesn't know, the research and development tax credit is a tax credit available to companies of all sizes who are creating new or improving upon existing products or processes. And they need to be technological in nature. And so PwC has a leading industry team. They are dedicated to maximizing the credit for our clients. And in fact, a lot of us on the call today do these types of activities that qualify for the credit, and you may have had to have been a part of an R&D study in the past. And so we had a legacy solution that had a robust set of features, and we wanted to re-platform that so that we could match that industry-leading team and the industry-leading services that they provide. So when you start talking about re-platforming, everybody's eyes get really big, right? Because they're like, it's going to do everything in legacy and more. And most importantly, it's going to look so much better. And so for me, I knew that they wanted that, and I wanted to deliver that, right? I wanted to give it to them on a silver platter. But then I came to the technology team. We were going to use our internal tax technology team to help us do this replatforming. And they took my list of must-haves and they were like, here, let me introduce you to the minimal viable product. And so for me, I went through this mini grieving period, is like I like to call it, the MVP grieving period, because first, total denial that I wasn't going to be able to give my users everything that they wanted. The second thing was the anger and frustration that they weren't going to have the same features in legacy when we launched this MVP product. And then the third thing was going to be, coming to an area of acceptance based on the capacity limits, right? Based on the scope, based on the developers, based on the timeline. We wanted to get this thing out before busy season, so that way we could get really good, meaningful feedback. And it was just, we weren't going to be able to do everything. So once I accepted those limitations of the capacity, I knew that there was one thing for us that was important, and that was at least presenting the image of a total complete product. And so in the discussions, one of the things was a dashboard and a landing page, which wasn't much, right? Just a couple dashboards on that landing page, but it really kind of wraps the site up nicely and it presents itself as a complete product. And I knew as soon as I delivered this MVP, the partners were going to want to start demoing out at clients. They're going to want to start putting marketing material together. So while it may not traditionally meet MVP, it was MVP to the business. And so to mitigate that frustration that we know we were going to see from the user group, we did a couple of things. The first thing we did was involve the practice leaders and our talented staff in the requirements stage and really leveraging what was working in legacy and what was not working in legacy. I always like to preach that they built the tool because they were with us from the very beginning, building requirements, doing the user experience testing, going through user acceptance testing, really giving them as much involvement in the process helps give them a sense of ownership in the tool. The next thing we needed them to help us with was critical path. What's your nice to have, nicer to have, and then what do you absolutely have to really just get the study done? And so that also gave them a little bit of ownership, a little bit of skin in the game to make sure that they understood kind of where this MVP was going to be. But then they also knew that everything else was coming. It just wasn't coming right now. And I think the third thing that we did that was probably my favorite thing was we had a dedicated adoption team. So I don't know if everybody has capacity for an adoption team, but we were lucky enough because we work so fast in our agile style of working that it was good to have a team focused just on user adoption, of course, but also providing education and training to our internal staff, our production support, being able to share leading practices. And even more important was the key workarounds while they were waiting for our features to be developed. These were the ways that you could get around it while you were waiting for this feature to come out. And now that we've moved past that initial chunk of features being in the application, it's a process that we continue to do regardless of what we're building. If it's something big or if it's even just like a little button that we're adding in, we make sure that we're building it based on what they're asking, building it to an MVP, and then iterating on that feedback. And we give ourselves capacity when we're planning our backlog because we know we're going to get a lot of user feedback. I don't know if you guys work with partners at consulting firms, but we get a lot of feedback from them in our staff. So it's really nice to kind of have that built into the backlog so that we can delight them whenever, we're mid-sprint, they give us a recommendation, we work it into the next sprint, and in less than 4 weeks, they can see that in production. So while at first MVP was a tough pill for me to swallow, it's since really laid the groundwork for how we develop in the future. And it allows us to iterate based on what we see in the field, what we hear when we're on client demos, and then what we see out in the market. You can find our RCS video on YouTube if you Google PwC and RCS. And I thank you for the time today.
Awesome, Kelly. Thank you so much. And I think you did wonderful pivoting without your slides. I just loved hearing your story. So can't say if it was better or worse, but you did a really great job.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Last but not least, I'm going to turn it over to David.
All right, let's unmute first. What is up, everybody? Let's see if I can share mine or if I have to pivot as well. We good?
We're good.
Fantastic. So being last is probably good and bad. If it sucks, it's let's just do the last in, first out thing. Just forget you heard it. If it's amazing, it'll stick with you, right? So we're good on either front, but excited to be here. So I'm going to talk about something today that it's probably a little more high level than I think what pretty much everybody else has gotten into. Kind of assume that would be the case. So this has to do more with relationships than it does with the act of being in product leadership from a tactical standpoint. And so this is the talk that I give a lot in the opposite direction on the executive side. I'll talk for a minute in a minute about kind of where I come from, but I don't actually get to look at this topic in the other direction very often. So I'm excited to be able to talk to y'all really quick, just to introduce myself. So I'm an engineer that did the software founding thing. I've worked as a product executive. Definitely continue to advise and invest on the startup front, advise on the nonprofit front. But my day job is as a managing partner at a company called Level. So we're in the consulting world, and most of my time and my company's time is spent in that intersection of market, product, tech. I think a lot of you probably are in the same boat in one form or another. And for me specifically, like I'm generally working on herding the cats, right? So externally, that means trying to help executives kind of understand what steps to take next. Internally, in finding the right ways to build and design these things that people actually want to do that can be super influential out in the world when done right. But like I said, most of the time when I'm talking about the role of product in the enterprise, or frankly, just the role of product as an innovation tool, I'm always having to do it from the like, well, where do we invest and how do we spend money? And this feels like it's stuck. And it's a very sort of top down, frankly, like most of the time it's just a bitch session around this isn't working. It's effectively agile 5 years ago when everybody was dumping money into that and saying it's not working and it's been 17 minutes, what's wrong? In a lot of ways, I think product has kind of become that in some ways. But today I want to look at it from the other direction. And that is, when you look at folks like, frankly, like us that are in the middle of it, that are actually having to build out product and wanting to know kind of like, what does that look like? One of the questions that I like to ask is, what does freedom actually look like to you in your role? So it's November. This has all kinds of meta meanings that we're not getting into. This is not political. This is a professional question, right? Which is, from a product perspective, clearly there are folks that they look at their role in product and innovation, and it feels like the expectations are limitless. I think, what Kelly just hit on in terms of, kind of this, like, where the expectations are set, but the constraints are significant, right? And that does not feel freeing. Let's just be honest. It doesn't. And so I think keep this in mind as I'm going through. I'll come back to this question in the end, but I first want to talk about, something that's, I don't know, this is going to feel negative to end the day on, I promise I'll turn it positive, but we may be overplaying, right, the role that product has in some cases. And I think that's leading to, frankly, some difficulties for the folks that are trying to do the job. So let's start by if you're honest about your own opinions, if you're honest about conversations that you have with people that are in the product world, and you ask them, and listen, this is true of a 50,000 person company, this is true of a 3-person startup. If you ask them if all the other people in the room get it, it almost always looks like this, right? It's like, no, they're clueless, they don't understand, design thinking, customer experience, like I've got 17 other buzzwords, if those don't work, but somehow or another, like, I'm going to prove that nobody gets it but me, right? And there's one side of that feels fairly negative, but the other piece to it is that it leads to kind of this hero thinking, right? Which is, if that's true, if they're legitimately in the middle of the desert without water, like, it is my job to find the oasis in the desert. Like, we're going to walk for days to get there, but like, damn it, we're going to find the water in the desert. And that's my role. And I think sometimes that can be difficult because the truth is, like, what if you just played that wrong, right? What if they're just pissed off in the restaurant because, like, it's been 20 minutes since somebody refilled their water, and like, yeah, they're thirsty, but like the pitcher's only 10 feet away, right? So we tend to, and by the way, like, this is not unique to product leadership or product management. I think there are a lot of areas, especially in the digital world, that fit this way. But we tend to immediately assume the worst of the folks and the processes around us. And it leads to these like grandiose expectations that we put on ourselves that then feed into the expectations that folks have on us. And obviously that can have it can be rough, right? Let's just call it what it is. It can be rough to operate in that mode where you feel like maybe progress isn't coming the way that it needs to. And I'm talking about both what gets delivered, but also the way that it all goes down in the process, right? It's not just about kind of what gets turned out in the end. And so, the question is like, is this good or bad? Like, all right, cool. We're probably overplaying this, but I kind of believe that there's some other things that are true. So is this good news or not? And so what I wanted to at least, and this is a, hour-long topic in and of itself, but what I wanted to at least share quickly with you guys today, this is something that I know it's very consulting-esque. It's got the freaking colors and the columns and everything else. Sorry, it's like my default these days. But ignore the format. And what I wanted to talk about a little bit is think about what you already have and take it from two from two dimensions, right? So I don't care, again, if you're a startup, if you work at Cap One, if you work for some company that's medium sized, the truth is you're operating in a market, and these are just examples, by the way, but you're operating in a market. You have customers, you have a team around you. You have colleagues, right? You have an existing product, probably. You have process of some sort. You have tools that have been chosen. Like all of these things are inputs, and each of those inputs come with their own perspective. Meaning there are things that exist right now, today. You don't have to do anything that you could extract from those elements that are around you that would not only be useful, but they would actually help you get to where you need to go, right? And it's going to come at different levels. Some organizations are killing it in one area, maybe not so great in another, et cetera, et cetera. But these things do exist. And on the other side, for each of those things, where you could actually make some bets, right? And as somebody who's a product professional, the thing that we are best at is taking data, doing research, having conversations, prioritizing actions into strategies, hypothesizing about what could happen, and then iterating through that. Right? This is what we do for a living. But I think what's ironic is that most of the time, while we do this for a living in the way that we churn out products, we very rarely look at the people and the resources around us in the same way. So in other words, we don't go about our jobs as though we were strategizing, as though we were going to take little bites, as though we were going to, use an MVP philosophy to how we work with other people, right? We put all the pressure on ourselves to nail it the second that we get on the job. And so one small tactic, and again, this looks super, super consulting, I get it. This is also what happens when you sort of, reuse material for different things. Remember, I have to present to certain types of people some of the time. But what you do end up with, forget about the radar graph, and just think about if you're able to honestly place where each of those resources are in your organization, the people and the stuff that's around you, if you're able to rank them in whatever way makes sense to you and say, you know what, like this is pretty far along, or maybe this isn't so far along, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of step one. Step two then is to say, all right, so in the areas where we are more mature, or forget about maturity, be selfish. In the areas where things can really help our product to get to where it needs to go, that's where I'm going to place a bet. Right, that's where we're going to go harder than we might have otherwise. So we're going to be measured in most of our areas, but we're going to go harder in others. What this stacks up to, right, and in the end, this is fairly obvious, is you want as many perspectives as you can get, and you want to take sort of measured risk for the long haul, so that this thing will actually survive, meaning the project or the effort, versus the other way around, which is very few perspectives and tons of risk, where you're almost destined to fail in at least a couple of those areas if you go too crazy, and you're not going to have anybody to back you up. You're not going to have that perspective to be able to say, oh, well, hey guys, remember when we said that this might fail? You're going to be out on an island. And so really, for me, when I think back to this question of like, what does freedom look like to you? I'm going to wrap with this. I think for a lot of people, they look at that in the context of freedom is finding that oasis in the desert, right? It's this big bang sort of, once we get it out the door, once I show everybody how great this is, like that's the moment I'm free. And, I think the challenge that I would make to you to basically like run my analogy into the ground here is that, what if freedom just looks like a nicer bottle of water sometimes, right? And you can get lots of nice bottles of water, but sometimes it's not about trying to get everybody to see things exactly the way that you need them to see and exactly on all of those buzzwords that you eventually want to get to, right? Because those things, we know how valuable each of those concepts can be, right? But sometimes it really is about finding the areas where people can already help you today, and your value in terms of like where you can actually take the product over a medium term or a long term is actually going to be like way better in that sense than if you're trying to kind of, drag them through the desert from day one. So that is all I got. Thanks so much. Appreciate you hanging around to the end.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'll steal Kelly's quote, which is no shame in that consulting life game. Just embrace it. All right. So we are at the end of the session. I think we have successfully made it through 7 lightning talks. So thank you for your various experiences with us. Very cool. I feel like my mind needs to go debrief on all of the cool concepts that we heard. I'm happy to leave the Zoom group here, chat and all open for the next few minutes if folks have questions or want to come off mute and talk. We can facilitate that, but only if you all promise to take the survey that Sarah has put in the chat. So we want your feedback on what you like about ProductTank Richmond, what you'd like to see in the future. Would you recommend us to your friends? We hope the answer is yes, but if not, we want to know why and what we can do better.